You might think the badge makes you untouchable until you pull over the man who commands the people you answer to. Officer Kyle Bennett thought he had an easy target, a black man driving a luxury SUV through a jurisdiction known for its zero tolerance on outsiders. He expected nervousness. He expected a plea for mercy. What he didn't expect was that the man behind the wheel was Special Agent Jamal Wright, the tactical commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team heading to a classified staging ground. Bennett thought he was protecting his town, but he was actually initiating the end of his career. Watch closely, because when the backup arrives, it doesn't come with sirens, it comes with rotors. This is how one ego destroyed an entire department. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon of Ridgeview County, casting long, bruised shadows across the asphalt of State Highway 321. It was the kind of town where the church steeple was the highest point for miles, and the local police department operated less like a law enforcement agency and more like a private security firm for the old money residents. Jamal Wright adjusted the rearview mirror of the matte black Chevrolet Tahoe. He wasn't in his tactical gear, not yet. Today he was wearing a crisp charcoal suit, the jacket folded neatly on the passenger seat next to a locked Pelican case containing a specialized HK-416 rifle. Jamal was the unit chief for the FBI's hostage rescue team, HRT, the tip of the spear for federal law enforcement. He was heading to a rendezvous point where his team would brief for a dawn raid on a human trafficking compound hidden in the Appalachian foothills. He checked his watch. He was making good time. He respected the speed limit, keeping the heavy SUV exactly at the posted limit. Jamal knew the statistics better than anyone. He knew that a black man, regardless of his title, his clearance level, or the badge in his pocket, was statistically more likely to be stopped in counties like Ridgeview. He didn't have time for a hassle. Lives were literally on the line. But statistics have a way of manifesting in the rearview mirror. Blue and red strobe lights erupted behind him, cutting through the twilight. No siren, just the aggressive flash of authority, demanding submission. Jamal sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion rather than fear. He tapped the brakes, signaling his intent to pull over, and guided the Tahoe onto the gravel shoulder. As he put the vehicle in park, he lowered all four windows, a habit born of survival, not regulation, and placed his large hands visibly on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. In the side mirror, he watched the patrol car. It was a Dodge Charger, heavily modified with a push bar that looked like it had seen plenty of use. The door opened, and Officer Kyle Bennett stepped out. Bennett was the archetype of a certain kind of rural policing. He was in his mid-30s, his uniform slightly too tight around the biceps, his hair cut high and tight. He walked with a swagger that suggested he owned the pavement beneath his boots. His hand rested casually but intentionally on the grip of his holstered Glock. Bennett approached the passenger side first, peering through the open window, his eyes scanning the interior. He saw the suit jacket. He saw the Pelican case, and then he looked at Jamal. "License and registration," Bennett said. No greeting, no reason for the stop. His voice was flat, bored, yet edged with a specific kind of disdain. "Good evening, officer," Jamal said, his voice a deep, calm baritone that usually commanded silence in briefing rooms. "I have my wallet in my back right pocket. I'm going to reach for it now." Bennett's hand tightened on his weapon. "Just get the license." Jamal moved slowly, retrieving his wallet. He pulled out his driver's license, but he also slid out his federal credentials, the heavy leather wallet with the gold FBI shield and the ID card identifying him as a supervisory special agent. He handed both to Bennett. Bennett took them, glancing at the license first. "Washington, D.C. license," Bennett muttered. "Long way from home, boy." Jamal ignored the diminutive. "I'm passing through on federal business, officer. Is there a reason for the stop?" Bennett finally looked at the FBI credentials. He stared at them for a long second, then looked back at Jamal, a smirk curling the corner of his lip. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Federal business," Bennett repeated, weighing the leather wallet in his hand like it was a piece of trash. "You know, I've seen some good fakes in my time. The laminating on this is top-notch. Where'd you buy it? Internet or one of those sovereign citizen websites?" Jamal's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "That is a legitimate federal ID, officer. I am Special Agent Wright, Unit Chief of the HRT. You can call the number on the back to verify." Bennett tossed the credentials back into the car. They landed on the floor mat face down. The disrespect was calculated. "Step out of the car," Bennett commanded, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. "Officer, for what purpose?" Jamal asked, remaining perfectly still. "I have identified myself. I am on a time-sensitive operation." "I said step out of the car," Bennett shouted, his hand now fully gripping his pistol. "I smell narcotics, and I have probable cause to believe this vehicle is stolen. We've had reports of a black SUV moving drugs up from the border. Matches the description." Jamal knew there was no such report. The Tahoe was government property, registered to the Department of Justice. The plates were unlisted in standard civilian databases, which should have flagged Bennett to back off, not double down. "Officer," Jamal said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder, "you are making a mistake. Check the plates properly. It will come back as a DOJ vehicle. Get out now." Bennett ripped the door open. Jamal unbuckled his seatbelt. He knew the drill. If he resisted even passively, Bennett would escalate to violence, and Jamal couldn't afford a shooting. Not when he had a team waiting for him. He stepped out, towering over Bennett by a few inches. Bennett stepped back, intimidated by Jamal's physical presence, but bolstered by the badge on his chest. "Turn around, hands on the hood, spread your legs." "You are detaining a federal agent without cause," Jamal stated clearly as he placed his hands on the warm hood of the Tahoe. "This is recorded. Your dash cam is running." "My dash cam malfunctions a lot," Bennett whispered, leaning in close to Jamal's ear. "And out here, nobody cares about your fake badge." The metal of the handcuffs bit into Jamal's wrists. Bennett didn't just apply them, he ratcheted them down until they pinched the nerves, a petty, painful tactic designed to provoke a reaction. Jamal didn't flinch. He had endured SERE training. He had been shot at in 3 different countries. A tight pair of cuffs was an annoyance, not a torture. "You're making a grave error, Officer Bennett," Jamal said, reading the nameplate on the officer's chest as he was spun around and shoved against the side of the Tahoe. "It's Sergeant Bennett to you," Bennett spat. He began to pat Jamal down, his hands rough and invasive. He reached into Jamal's pockets, pulling out a cell phone, a secure satellite phone used for encrypted comms. "What is this?" Bennett asked, turning the heavy rubberized device over in his hands. "Burner phone, dealer phone." "That is government property. It is encrypted," Jamal warned. "Do not attempt to access it." Bennett laughed and shoved the phone into his own pocket. "I'll access whatever I want. We'll see what kind of contacts you have in there. Probably half the dealers in D.C. Bennett then turned his attention to the interior of the Tahoe. He saw the Pelican case. "Locked case," Bennett said, his eyes lighting up. "That's the stash, huh?" "That contains a classified weapon system," Jamal said, his voice cutting through the evening air like a razor. "If you touch that case, you are violating the National Security Act. I'm ordering you to stand down and contact your watch commander immediately." Bennett paused. The term National Security Act sounded heavy, but Bennett was too deep now. His ego had taken the wheel, and he was driving off a cliff. He couldn't back down in front of a suspect he had already profiled as a criminal. To Bennett, Jamal was just a guy in a suit pretending to be something he wasn't. "You like giving orders, don't you?" Bennett sneered. "Well, you're not in charge here. I am." Bennett grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I've got a 1015 in custody. Black male, large build, impersonating a federal officer transporting suspected narcotics and firearms, requesting a tow for a black Chevy Tahoe." "Copy, 4 Alpha," the dispatcher's voice crackled. "Tow is en route. Do you need backup?" Bennett looked at Jamal, who was standing stoically by the car. "Negative. Subject is secured. I'm bringing him in." Bennett grabbed Jamal by the arm and marched him toward the patrol car. He shoved Jamal into the cramped back seat, the hard plastic digging into his spine. The cage was humiliating, smelling of stale vomit and industrial cleaner. As Bennett walked back to the Tahoe to do a preliminary search before the tow arrived, Jamal shifted his weight. He was handcuffed behind his back, but his fingers were nimble. He wore a specialized watch, a Garmin Tactical tailored for field ops. It had a kill switch feature, but it also had a distress beacon. It wasn't a standard 911 panic button. It was a signal directly to the HRT Operations Center in Quantico and linked to the forward operating base where his team was currently prepping. Jamal pressed the sequence of buttons on the side of the watch. Beacon active, signal sent. Inside the Tahoe, Bennett was trying to pry open the Pelican case. He was sweating now. The lock was biometric. He couldn't open it. Frustrated, he kicked the dashboard. He looked at the registration he had ignored earlier. He finally typed the license plate number into his ruggedized laptop. The screen didn't come back with a name. It didn't come back with stolen. It flashed a bright red banner. Level 5 security clearance. DOJ/FBI asset. Do not detain. Alert watch commander immediately. Bennett stared at the screen. The blood drained from his face. The red banner pulsed. System glitch, he muttered to himself, his voice trembling slightly. Gotta be a hack. These guys are sophisticated. He slammed the laptop shut. He convinced himself it was a trick. It had to be. If it was real, he had just assaulted a high-ranking federal agent. The cognitive dissonance was deafening. He decided to stick to the narrative. The guy was a fraud, a hacker, a criminal mastermind. Bennett walked back to the patrol car, opened the driver's door, and got in. He adjusted the rearview mirror to look at Jamal. Computer says you're a ghost, Bennett lied, his voice wavering just a fraction. Says the car doesn't exist. That means you put fake plates on it. Jamal met his eyes in the mirror. The computer told you exactly who I am, Sergeant, and you're terrified because you know you just ended your career, but it gets worse. Shut up, Bennett snapped, putting the car in gear. My team was expecting me to check in. I had missed my check-in. They are tracking my GPS, and since I activated my distress beacon, they aren't coming to write you a ticket. Bennett slammed on the brakes before they even hit the pavement. You did what? I signaled a distress. Officer down. High-value asset compromised, Jamal said. You didn't just pull over a driver, Bennett. You detained the commander of a counterterrorism unit, and you just declared war on the FBI. Bennett turned around, his face purple with rage. You're lying. I searched you. I took your phone. Jamal nodded toward his wrist. You didn't take my watch. Bennett scrambled out of the car, ripped the back door open, and grabbed Jamal's wrist. He saw the watch face pulsing red, beacon active. Bennett panicked. He fumbled for his key to unlock the cuffs, thinking maybe he could undo it. Maybe he could say it was a misunderstanding. But then he stopped. If he let him go now, Jamal would report him. Bennett would lose his pension, his badge, everything. The only way out was through. He had to book him. He had to plant something. He had to make the charges stick so hard that nobody would believe the federal agent's story. Bennett slammed the door shut again. We're going to the station. We'll see how tough you are in the holding cell. He floored the accelerator, tires screeching as he peeled onto the highway. But high above in the darkening sky, the low thrum of rotors began to vibrate the air. 2 UH-60 Blackhawks painted matte black with no markings banked sharply from their flight path. The pilot of the lead chopper keyed his mic. Command, this is Shadow 1. We have the commander's beacon signal. It's moving. It's in a local law enforcement vehicle. Intercepting now. Bennett turned up his radio to drown out the noise in his head, unaware that the shadow falling over his car wasn't the night. It was the predator he had just provoked. The Ridgeview Police Department was a squat brick building that smelled of stale coffee, lemon floor wax, and misery. It sat isolated on the edge of town, a fortress of local authority, where the only laws that mattered were the ones written by Chief Earl Thompson. Sergeant Kyle Bennett dragged Jamal Wright through the back entrance past the break room where 2 other officers looked up from their phones. They saw the handcuffed black man in the expensive suit, saw the sweat beading on Bennett's forehead, and shared a knowing look. Another out-of-towner learning the local rules. Booking him, Bennett barked, shoving Jamal toward the intake desk. Possession with intent, impersonating a federal officer, resisting arrest, and let's add assault on a police officer. Jamal stood straight despite his hands being cuffed behind him. The pain in his wrists was sharp, but his mind was clear. He scanned the room. 2 cameras, one in the corner, likely a dummy, one above the desk, likely functional. He shifted his stance, slightly angling his body so the functional camera would catch Bennett's movements clearly. Behind the desk sat Officer Linda Ward, a woman in her 50s who looked like she had seen it all and cared about none of it. She popped her gum. Big haul, Kyle. Huge, Bennett said, his voice jittery. Guy thinks he's FBI, had a fake badge, fake comms gear, probably a runner for the DC gangs. Bennett emptied his own pockets onto the counter. Jamal's wallet, the satellite phone, and the car keys clattered onto the metal surface. Then Bennett turned his back to the camera, shielding his hands with his body. He reached into his cargo pocket, the one where he kept confiscated items that never made it to the evidence locker. He pulled out a small, clear plastic baggie filled with white powder. It was cocaine seized from a college student a while back and kept for exactly this kind of rainy day. "And look what I found in his jacket pocket," Bennett announced loudly, turning back around and tossing the baggie onto the counter next to Jamal's ID. Ward raised an eyebrow. "Sloppy." Jamal spoke for the first time since entering the building. "Linda, is it? I want you to look closely at that bag. You'll notice there is no condensation from body heat despite Officer Bennett claiming it was in my pocket, and if you run it for prints, you will find Officer Bennett's thumbprint on the seal and none of mine." Bennett slammed his hand on the counter. "Shut your mouth. Nobody talks to her but me." The commotion drew the attention of the corner office. The door creaked open and Chief Earl Thompson stepped out. Thompson was a mountain of a man, built like a retired linebacker who had discovered donuts. He chewed on a toothpick, his eyes narrow and calculating. He didn't like noise in his station. "Bennett," Thompson rumbled, "why is my station sounding like a bar fight?" "Chief?" Bennett straightened up, but the panic was still vibrating in his voice. "I got a 1015 here, high-risk stop. He's carrying a sophisticated fake ID. Says he's FBI. Found this coke on him. He's been threatening me the whole ride in." Thompson walked over slowly. He picked up the FBI credentials from the counter. He rubbed the leather, felt the weight of the badge. He looked at the ID card, studying the holographic watermark. Thompson had been a cop for decades. He knew a fake when he saw one. This didn't look fake. He looked at Jamal. He saw the suit, Italian wool. He saw the shoes, tactical dress, expensive. He saw the eyes, calm, predatory, unafraid. "You're claiming this is a fake?" Thompson asked Bennett, not looking away from Jamal. "Yes, sir. High quality but fake. The computer flagged his car as do not detain, which means he hacked the DOJ database to mask his plates." Thompson paused. A do not detain flag wasn't something a hacker usually managed to insert into the NCIC National Crime Information Center mainframe without triggering a nationwide manhunt. "Who are you?" Thompson asked Jamal directly. "I'm Special Agent Jamal Wright, Unit Chief, Hostage Rescue Team," Jamal replied, his voice level. "I'm currently part of a joint task force operation that is time critical. Sergeant Bennett has kidnapped a federal agent, planted narcotics on video, and ignored a level 5 security flag. Every second you keep me here is a felony, Chief." Bennett laughed, a nervous cracking sound. "Listen to him. Kidnapped. He's delusional. Chief, let me throw him in the drunk tank. I'll print him, and when nothing comes back, we'll know." Thompson looked at the drugs on the counter. Then he looked at Bennett. He knew Bennett was a loose cannon, but Bennett was his loose cannon. If Bennett was lying, the department was liable. If Bennett was right, it was the bust of the century. Thompson made the wrong choice. He chose to protect the tribe. "Process him," Thompson said, tossing the ID back on the counter. "But do it by the book, Bennett. If I find out you planted that snow, I'll skin you. But for now, strip search him and put him in cell 2. "With pleasure," Bennett grinned. He grabbed Jamal's arm again. "Come on, Agent. Let's get you a jumpsuit." "Chief Thompson," Jamal said, not moving. "My team is tracking a distress beacon located on my wrist. They are out there. You have a very short window to de-escalate this." "Take his watch," Thompson ordered, turning back to his office, "and shut him up." Bennett reached for the Garmin Tactical on Jamal's wrist. He fumbled with the clasp. "It's a dual locking mechanism," Jamal said quietly. "If you force it, it triggers a secondary alarm indicating the agent is being tortured or stripped. That changes the rules of engagement for the rescue team from extract to neutralize." Bennett hesitated. He looked at the watch. The face was pulsing a dull red. "Screw it," Bennett muttered. He didn't take the watch off. He just shoved Jamal toward the holding cells. "Keep your little toy. It won't save you." Bennett shoved Jamal into cell 2, a concrete box with a steel toilet and a wooden bench. He uncuffed one hand, then the other, and slammed the heavy barred door shut, locking it with a satisfying clank. "Get comfortable," Bennett taunted through the bars. "I'm going to go write up the report that sends you to state prison." Jamal rubbed his wrists. He walked to the center of the cell, looked up at the small barred window near the ceiling, and checked his watch. Beacon locked. Asset stationary. The team was closing in. Jamal sat on the bench, crossed his legs, and waited. He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt a profound sense of pity for what was about to happen to this building. It started with the coffee in Officer Linda Ward's mug. She was sitting at the front desk typing in the booking sheet when she noticed the liquid in her cup rippling. Small, concentric circles vibrating from the center. She frowned. Is there a truck passing by? Then came the sound. It wasn't the rumble of an 18-wheeler. It was a rhythmic thumping beat that chopped at the air. Whump, whump, whump. It grew louder, faster until the glass in the front doors began to rattle in their frames. What the hell is that? Bennett asked, coming out of the back room with a clipboard. Suddenly, the world outside the station turned white. 3 massive floodlights generated from the air blasted through the front windows, blinding Ward and Bennett. The light was so intense it felt physical, like a wall of heat. Whump, 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 whump. The sound was deafening now. It was directly overhead. Dust and debris from the roof began to fall like snow. Earthquake! Ward screamed, covering her ears. No! Thompson yelled, bursting out of his office. Helicopters, low altitude! Before they could react, the front parking lot exploded with noise. Tires screeched. Not one car, but a dozen. Heavy doors slammed. The sound of boots, dozens of boots hitting the pavement in unison. Then a voice. It didn't come from a person. It came from a devastatingly loud PA system, likely mounted on an aircraft. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Ridgeview Police Department is surrounded. All personnel inside, place your weapons on the floor and exit with your hands above your heads. You have 20 seconds. Bennett dropped his clipboard. The plastic shattered on the floor. His face went ashen. No, no way. It's a trick. A trick? Thompson roared, grabbing Bennett by the collar. Who has Blackhawks for a trick? Bennett, what did you bring to my doorstep? 15 seconds. Outside, the scene looked like a war zone. 2 UH-60 Blackhawks were hovering just above the tree line, their snipers trained on the station's windows. On the ground, 4 black armored Suburbans and a Bearcat tactical vehicle had formed a semicircle around the entrance. Men in full tactical gear, multicam uniforms, heavy plate carriers, ops corps helmets with panoramic night vision mounts were moving with terrifying precision. They weren't standard SWAT. These were Tier 1 operators, HRT. Leading the ground element was senior team leader Mike Donovan. He was a wiry, tough man with a beard and eyes that looked like they could burn through steel. He held a suppressed HK-416 rifle at the low ready. Breach team, hold, Donovan spoke into his headset. Give them 10 seconds to surrender. If they don't, we take the door. Inside the station, panic reigned. Ward was under the desk sobbing. We have to go out there, Thompson yelled. He looked at his own holster. Do not touch your guns, do you hear me? Do not touch them. But the prisoner, Bennett stammered. If they find him, if they don't find him, we're dead. Thompson shoved Bennett toward the door. Open it. Thompson kicked the front door open. He walked out first, his hands raised high into the blinding light. Bennett followed, trembling, his hands shaking so badly he could barely keep them up. Ward followed, hyperventilating. On your knees now. The command came from everywhere. Red laser dots danced across their chests, 3 on Thompson, 2 on Bennett. Down! Get down! Thompson screamed at his officers. They collapsed onto the asphalt. Donovan moved forward. He didn't run. He stalked. He walked right up to Chief Thompson. The barrel of his rifle pointed strictly at the ground, but his demeanor screamed violence. I am Team Leader Donovan, he said, his voice cutting through the rotor wash. Who is the watch commander? I am, Thompson stammered, sweat stinging his eyes. Chief Earl Thompson. Chief Thompson, Donovan said, leaning in. You have exactly 30 seconds to produce Special Agent Jamal Wright unharmed. If there is a scratch on him, I will dismantle this building brick by brick until I find the man who put it there. He's in the back, Thompson cried out, pointing behind him. Cell 2, he's fine. We just booked him. Donovan tapped his headset. Alpha Team, secure the package. Bravo, detain these hostiles. Hostiles, Bennett squeaked from the ground. I'm a police officer. A tactical operator, a massive man nicknamed Tank, stepped on Bennett's calf, pinning him to the ground. You're a suspect in a federal kidnapping, pal. Don't speak. 2 operators rushed past the kneeling police officers and breached the station. They moved with fluid speed, clearing the corners. They reached the holding cell area. 1 operator produced a bolt cutter, but the keys were hanging on the wall. He grabbed them, unlocked cell 2, and swung the door open. Jamal was still sitting on the bench. He stood up slowly, adjusting his suit jacket, which was wrinkled but intact. Boss, the operator said, nodding. Traffic was a mess. Sorry we're late. Jamal checked his watch. We'll discuss the delay at debrief. Yes, sir. Jamal walked out of the cell. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like the man in charge. He walked through the station past the intake desk where his ID and the planted drugs still sat. He stopped. He picked up the baggie of powder Bennett had planted. He held it up to the light. Then he picked up his credentials and his phone. He walked out the front door. The wind from the helicopters whipped his tie. He stood on the steps of the police station, looking down at the 3 officers kneeling on the pavement. Bennett looked up. He saw Jamal standing there, flanked by men who looked like they killed terrorists for breakfast. The realization of what he had done finally hit him with the force of a freight train. Jamal walked down the steps, his dress shoes clicking on the pavement. He stopped directly in front of Bennett. Bennett couldn't meet his eyes. He stared at Jamal's shoes. "Look at me," Jamal ordered. It wasn't a yell. It was a command. Bennett looked up. He was crying. "You asked me for my ID," Jamal said softly. "You asked me what was in the case. You told me my badge was fake." Jamal leaned down, bringing his face inches from Bennett's. "Do I look fake to you now, Sergeant?" Bennett shook his head, a sob escaping his throat. "No, sir." Jamal stood up and turned to Donovan. "Agent Donovan, arrest them," Jamal said, pointing at Bennett and Thompson. "Violation of Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Also, kidnapping, assault on a federal officer, and tampering with evidence." Jamal tossed the baggie of drugs onto Bennett's chest. "Secure the scene. I want the DOJ Civil Rights Division on the phone, and I want the State Attorney General here within the hour." "Copy that, boss." Donovan grinned as the operator zip-tied Bennett's hands behind his back, much tighter than Bennett had done to Jamal. Jamal walked toward the lead SUV. He had a mission to get to. The raid on the trafficking compound was still a go, but for the Ridgeview Police Department, the war was just beginning, and they had already lost. The Ridgeview Police Station had undergone a hostile takeover. The FBI Mobile Command Center was now parked on the front lawn, its satellite dishes aimed at the stars. Inside, the drab beige hallways were swarming with agents in windbreakers marked FBI and DOJ. They were scrubbing servers, seizing physical files, and boxing up evidence. In Interrogation Room 1, the same room where Kyle Bennett had coerced confessions out of teenagers and out-of-towners for years, Bennett sat alone. He was handcuffed to the heavy steel table. The room was cold. The mirror on the wall, which he knew was two-way glass, offered him no reflection, only the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. He had been sitting there. No water, no phone call, just silence and the terrifying knowledge that the men outside weren't local deputies he could bully at the bar. The door buzzed and swung open. It wasn't Jamal Wright. Wright was long gone already, airborne toward the Appalachian foothills to save lives. Instead, a woman walked in. She was sharp-featured, wearing a navy pantsuit that cost more than Bennett's annual salary. She carried a slim leather folder and a tablet. She didn't look at Bennett. She sat down, placed the tablet on the table, and organized her pens with meticulous precision. "I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Mitchell," she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were devoid of sympathy. "I specialize in public corruption and civil rights violations." "Do you know why I flew down here from D.C., Mr. Bennett?" "It's Sergeant Bennett," he croaked, his throat dry. "And I want a lawyer. I have rights." Mitchell smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "You certainly do. Unlike the suspects you process, we actually respect the Constitution. Your union rep is in the lobby. He's currently watching the body cam footage from Agent Wright's rescue. Well, let's just say he's looking very pale." She tapped the tablet. A video played. It wasn't the dash cam. It was high-definition audio and video from a perspective Bennett hadn't accounted for. "Agent Wright's watch," Mitchell explained. "It records in 4K, and it has a highly sensitive microphone." On the screen, Bennett's face was distorted by the wide-angle lens, but his voice was crystal clear. "My dash cam malfunctions a lot, and out here nobody cares about your fake badge." Mitchell paused the video. "Premeditation, conspiracy to deprive rights, kidnapping." I was just doing my job," Bennett stammered. "I thought he was a threat, the drugs." Mitchell swiped the screen. Another video. This one showed Bennett inside the station, turning his back to the booking camera, reaching into his cargo pocket and pulling out the baggie. "We ran the prints on the baggie, Kyle," Mitchell said, dropping the formality. We found your print. We found the print of a college student named Tyler Evans, whom you arrested some time ago. You logged the drugs as destroyed. Instead, you kept them to plant on future suspects. That's a federal trafficking charge on top of the corruption. Bennett slumped in his chair. The air left his lungs. But here's the twist, Mitchell said, leaning in. We aren't just looking at that night. When we seized your laptop, we found your trophy folder. Photos of cash seized from traffic stops that never made it to the evidence locker. Text messages to Chief Thompson, splitting the proceeds. Mitchell opened her folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a plea agreement. Chief Thompson is in the next room, Mitchell lied smoothly. He's currently telling Agent Donovan that this was all your idea, that you were the rogue element, that he tried to stop you. Bennett's head snapped up. That lying son of a, he took 60%. It was his policy. Tax the tourists, he called it. Is that so? Mitchell raised an eyebrow, pulling a pen from her pocket. Because unless I hear it from you on the record right now, you're going to be the sole face of this investigation. You're looking at decades, Bennett. Federal time. Do you know what happens to dirty small-town cops in federal prison? Bennett snatched the pen. His loyalty to the Brotherhood evaporated the moment he realized the ship was sinking. I'll talk, Bennett said, his voice trembling with rage and fear. I'll give you Thompson. I'll give you the mayor. I'll give you everyone. Mitchell sat back, satisfaction settling in her eyes. Start from the beginning and speak clearly for the microphone. By morning, the town had changed forever. The locals woke up to a blockade. State troopers were managing the perimeter, but the center of town was occupied by a convoy of black SUVs. The Ridgeview Police Department sign had been taped over with yellow crime scene tape. The news vans arrived. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they were all parked on the lawn. The story was too juicy to ignore. A racist small-town cop tries to frame a black man only to discover that man is the head of the FBI's elite tactical unit. It was David versus Goliath, but Goliath brought an army. The press conference began. Standing at the podium wasn't Chief Thompson. It was the Special Agent in Charge, SAC, of the Regional FBI Office, flanked by Sarah Mitchell and a grim-faced State Attorney General. Yesterday evening, the SAC began, cameras flashing in a stroboscopic frenzy. Officers of this department engaged in the illegal detention of a high-ranking federal agent. This incident, however, has peeled back the layers of a systemic criminal enterprise operating under the guise of law enforcement in Ridgeview County. The feed cut to B-roll footage that was already leaking online. It showed Kyle Bennett being marched out of the station in his own handcuffs, looking small and defeated, flanked by the giants of the HRT. In the crowd, the townspeople watched. For years, they had whispered about Bennett and Thompson. They knew about the shakedowns. They knew about the fines that had to be paid in cash. But they had been too afraid to speak. Now, watching the feds carry boxes of evidence out the front door, the fear broke. A local mechanic shouted from the crowd, "Check the impound lot. They stole my truck last year." "Check the evidence locker," someone else yelled. Inside the station, the dismantling was total. The blue wall didn't just crack, it was pulverized. Kyle Bennett was currently in the back of a U.S. Marshal transport van. He was chained at the waist and ankles. He wasn't going to the county jail where he had friends. He was being transported to a federal holding facility in Atlanta. He looked out the barred window as the van rolled down Main Street. He saw the coffee shop where he used to get free lattes by flashing his badge. He saw the high school where he used to bully the kids. He saw his own patrol car, the Charger he loved so much, being loaded onto a flatbed truck by federal agents. They were seizing it as an instrument of a crime. His phone, which had been confiscated, was blowing up in an evidence bag somewhere. Text messages from his girlfriend. Is it true? His mom. Call me. And his buddies. Dude, delete our texts. We're piling up unread. But the hardest hit came from the radio in the front of the transport van. The marshals were listening to a national talk radio show. Can you imagine the stupidity? The host was laughing. He pulls over the commander of the hostage rescue team. That's like trying to mug John Wick. This Officer Bennett is quite possibly the dumbest criminal of the decade. And folks, the video is viral. It has millions of views. Bennett closed his eyes. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a national punchline. Meanwhile, not far away in a dense forest clearing, the real work was finishing. Jamal Wright stood over a kneeling suspect, a human trafficker who had been running a ring out of a hunting cabin. The HRT had executed the raid flawlessly. The hostages were secured. The bad guys were in zip ties. "Sir," Agent Mike Donovan approached, wiping soot from his face. "We got the all clear. Transport for the hostages is minutes out." "Good work, Mike," Jamal said, slinging his rifle. "By the way, boss," Donovan grinned, checking his phone, "you're trending on Twitter. Someone leaked the dash cam audio of you telling Bennett, 'Do I look fake to you now?' It's being remixed on TikTok." Jamal shook his head, a rare, weary smile touching his lips. He looked down at his watch, the gadget that had saved him. "I don't care about the trend," Jamal said, walking toward the extract chopper. "I just hope the next time a young man drives through that town, he gets home safely." "I think the Ridgeview PD is permanently closed for business, sir," Donovan said. "They're dissolving the department. State police are taking over jurisdiction effective immediately." Jamal nodded. He looked up at the sky. The justice system was slow, flawed, and often broken. But every once in a while, when the stars aligned and the arrogance of the corrupt exceeded their intelligence, the hammer dropped exactly where it needed to. "Let's go home," Jamal said. The wheels of federal justice grind slowly, but unlike the local courts in Ridgeview County, where Chief Thompson used to trade favors for verdicts over whiskey, the United States District Court operates with a terrifying mechanical precision. Time passed since the night the Blackhawks descended on the highway. For Kyle Bennett, however, time had lost all meaning. He had spent his confinement in solitary at a federal detention center, separated from the general population for his own safety. In prison, ex-cops, especially dirty ones, have a life expectancy measured in minutes if left unprotected. The courtroom was packed. The gallery was a sea of reporters, civil rights activists, and the citizens of Ridgeview who had traveled to the city to see the finale of the drama that had liberated their town. When the bailiff announced all rise, the silence was absolute. The Honorable Judge Harlan Brooks entered. Brooks was a legend in the circuit, a man known for his disdain for corruption and his hammer of God sentencing guidelines. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked straight at the defense table. Kyle Bennett sat there wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. The swagger was gone. The high and tight haircut had grown out into a shaggy, unkempt mess. He looked small. Beside him, his court-appointed public defender looked exhausted. There was no high-priced Blue Line legal defense fund for Bennett. The police union had cut him loose the day the body cam footage hit the national news. At the co-defendants' table sat Earl Thompson. The former chief looked even worse. The stress had grayed his hair completely. He refused to look at Bennett. They had spent the time blaming each other in endless depositions, their brotherhood dissolving into a venomous rat race to see who could secure a plea deal first. Prosecutor Sarah Mitchell stood up. She looked impeccable, the personification of the state's wrath. "Your Honor," Mitchell began, her voice echoing in the mahogany-paneled room, "we are here to sentence two men who treated the Constitution of the United States as a suggestion. They turned a public service into a private extortion racket, and on that fateful night, they attempted to destroy the life of a man simply because they profiled him as vulnerable." Mitchell gestured to the back of the courtroom. The heavy oak doors opened. Jamal Wright walked in. He wasn't wearing his tactical gear. He was wearing a navy blue bespoke suit, a white shirt, and a tie the color of dried blood. He didn't limp. He didn't look angry. He walked with the same terrifying calm he had displayed on the side of the highway. As he walked down the aisle, the gallery parted. People whispered. This was the man who had brought down the castle. Jamal took the stand to give his victim impact statement. He didn't need notes. "Mr. Wright," Judge Brooks said, his tone respectful, "please proceed." Jamal adjusted the microphone. He looked at Bennett. For the first time, Bennett met his gaze. Bennett's eyes were wet, pleading, desperate for a shred of mercy. "Some time ago," Jamal began, his voice deep and steady, "Kyle Bennett told me that nobody cares. He told me that in his town, my badge didn't matter. He told me that he was the law." Jamal paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But this case isn't about me. I had the training to withstand the psychological pressure. I had the resources to signal for help. I had a team of elite operators coming for me." Jamal turned to the gallery, looking at the faces of the Ridgeview residents, the mechanic whose truck was stolen, the mother whose son was framed. "The tragedy is not what happened to me," The tragedy is what happened to the hundreds of people before me who didn't have a distress beacon. The college student whose future was stolen because Bennett needed to hit a quota. The single father who lost his job because Thompson impounded his car for a fee. These men didn't just break the law. They broke the trust that holds civilization together. Jamal turned back to Bennett. Officer Bennett asked me if I looked fake to him. Today, I asked the court to ensure that his sentence is very real. Jamal stepped down. The room felt heavier, as if the weight of his words had physically settled on Bennett's shoulders. Then came the sentencing. First, Thompson. Judge Brooks peered over his glasses. Earl Thompson, you were the chief. You set the culture. You built the machine. You were sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will forfeit your pension, your assets, and your home to pay restitution to the victims of your department. Thompson slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. His wife, sitting in the front row, burst into tears. Then it was Bennett's turn. Kyle Bennett, Judge Brooks said. The name sounded like a curse. You were the enforcer. You planted evidence. You kidnapped a federal agent. You betrayed your oath in the most vile manner possible. You thought you were a predator, Mr. Bennett, but you forgot that there is always a bigger fish. Brooks picked up his gavel. For the charges of kidnapping, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and assault on a federal officer, I sentence you to 40 years in federal prison. Bennett gasped, a sound of pure shock. He was in his mid-30s. He would be an old man before he breathed free air again. His life was effectively over. Furthermore, Brooks continued, twisting the knife, I'm recommending that you serve your time at ADX Florence, the Supermax facility. You wanted to play the tough guy, Mr. Bennett. You will now live among the toughest criminals in the world in 23-hour lockdown. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none. The gavel strike sounded like a gunshot. As the marshals hauled Bennett away, he didn't scream, he didn't fight, he just wept. His legs dragging on the floor, a broken man who had flown too close to the sun on wings made of arrogance. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp. The media scrum was intense, microphones thrusting into Jamal's face. Agent Wright, how do you feel? Is this justice? A reporter from CNN shouted. Jamal stopped. He looked at the camera. Justice is a constant effort, Jamal said. Today was a good day, but tomorrow we get back to work. He walked past the cameras toward a waiting black SUV. Mike Donovan was behind the wheel. Good speech, boss, Donovan said as Jamal climbed in. By the way, did you hear about the Ridgeview station? What about it? Jamal asked, loosening his tie. The state auctioned it off. Donovan smiled. A non-profit group bought it. They're turning it into a legal aid clinic for low-income residents. It's going to be named the Jamal Wright Civil Rights Center. Jamal chuckled, a genuine warm sound. I'm going to veto the name, but I like the irony. As the SUV pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city, Jamal looked out the window. He thought about the traffic stop on the highway. He thought about the moment Bennett's flashlight hit his face. It was a chance encounter, a roll of the dice, but in that random moment, the universe had corrected a long-standing evil. The predator had picked the wrong prey. And in the wild, that is the one mistake you don't get to make twice. This story isn't just about a bad cop meeting a federal agent. It's a reminder that arrogance is the architect of its own destruction. Kyle Bennett believed his badge gave him the right to ruin lives, but he forgot that authority is borrowed, not owned. He profiled a man based on the car he drove and the color of his skin, never realizing that true power often moves in silence. In the end, the system he abused became the very hammer that crushed him. It's a lesson in humility, integrity, and the undeniable fact that no one is above the law, especially those sworn to uphold it. If this story of instant karma and justice satisfied you, please hit that like button. It helps us expose more stories like this to the world. Do you think Bennett's sentence of 40 years was fair, or was it too harsh? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to see more stories where the underdog wins and the corrupt get what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. You don't want to miss the next episode. Stay safe, stay sharp, and watch your back. Never underestimate the quiet power that moves through the world without fanfare. Kyle Bennett thought his badge made him untouchable, that his small-town authority gave him the right to judge a man by the color of his skin and the car he drove. In a single reckless moment, fueled by arrogance and prejudice, he crossed a line he could never uncross. What he failed to see was that true strength doesn't always announce itself with flashing lights and sirens. Sometimes it travels in silence, wearing a charcoal suit carrying invisible weight and unbreakable integrity. Bennett learned the hardest way possible that no one is above the law, especially those sworn to protect it. The moment he chose ego over justice, he didn't just destroy his own future. He shattered the fragile trust his entire department had built on fear and corruption. But in that darkness, something beautiful emerged. Accountability finally arrived, wrapped in rotor blades and federal resolve, reminding every one of us that real power belongs to those who wield it with humility and honor. This story hits deep because it proves that karma isn't always loud or immediate, but it is relentlessly fair. When arrogance blinds us, when prejudice guides our hands, the universe has a way of correcting the balance in ways we can never predict. So the next time you feel tempted to abuse even the smallest bit of authority, remember Kyle Bennett kneeling on that pavement, realizing too late that the man he tried to break was never the one who needed fixing. What about you? Have you ever witnessed someone's ego destroy everything they built, or seen quiet justice finally catch up to someone who thought they were untouchable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you and reminded you why integrity matters more than any badge or title, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful tale of karma, courage, and the quiet triumph of what's right. Stay humble, stay sharp, and remember, real power doesn't need to shout.